for those who say to me, stick to civil rights, I have another answer. That is that I've fought too long and too hard now against segregated public accommodation to end up segregating my moral concern. I'm not going to do that. Others can do what they want to do. That's their business. Other civil rights leaders, for various reasons, refuse or can't take a stand or have to go along with the administration. That's their business. But I must say tonight that I know that justice is indivisible. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.
Many of you are familiar with these lines of Friedrich Nietzsche. Nietzsche had a poignancy to what he said, and in many ways he also had a candor to what he said. He broke new ground. He did not coin the phrase, God is dead. He popularized it. He was the son of a minister, and both of his grandfathers were in the ministry. But this brilliant man, who was born 1844, died in 1900, did so much in that short span of time, and ironically lived out his own sense of nihilistic thought. When he died, he was, the last 14 years, he spent insane, and in periods of silence would suddenly break into scriptures that he had learned as a young lad. But listen to how he words it. Have you not heard of that madman who lit a lantern in the bright morning hours, ran to the marketplace and cried incessantly, I'm looking for God, I'm looking for God. As many of those who did not believe in God were standing together there, he excited considerable laughter. Have you lost him then, said one. Did he lose his way like a child, said another. Or is he hiding? Is he afraid of us? Has he gone on a voyage or emigrated? So they shouted and laughed, but the madman sprang into their midst and pierced them with his glances. Where is God? He cried. I'll tell you, we have killed him. You and I, we are all his murderers. But how did we do this? How were we able to drink up the sea? Who gave us a sponge to wipe away the entire horizon? What did we do when we unchained this earth from its sun? Whither is it moving now? Whither are we moving now? Away from all suns, maybe? Are we not perpetually falling backwards and forwards and sidewards and in all directions? Is there any up or down left? Are we not straying through an infinite nothing? Do we not feel the breath of empty space? Has it not suddenly become colder? Is not more and more night coming on us all the time? Must not lanterns now have to be lit in the morning hours? Do we not hear anything yet of the noise of the grave diggers who are burying God? Do we not smell anything yet of God's decomposition? God's decomposed too, you know, and he is dead. He remains dead. We've killed him. Now, how shall we, the murderer of all murderers, compose ourselves? Because that which was holiest and mightiest of all that the world has possessed has bled to death under our knives. Who will wipe this blood from us? With what water can we purify ourselves? What festivals of atonement, what sacred games will we need to invent? Is not this the greatest of deeds, too great for us? Must we not now ourselves have to become God, simply to seem worthy of what we've done? There's never been a greater deed, and whoever shall be born after us for the sake of this deed shall be part of a higher history than all history hitherto. It has been related further that on the same day the madman entered diverse churches and there sang a requiem, Aeternam Deo. Let out and quieted, he said to have retorted each time, what are these churches now, if they're not the tombs and sepulchres of God? God is dead. We have killed him. You know, with all due respect for Nietzsche and regard for him, the thing about him I like is his candor. He is raising the right questions of the implications of a godless universe. Who gave us a sponge to wipe away the entire horizon? Is there any up or down left? Must not lanterns now have to be lit in the morning hours? What he's really saying is, this is so humongous a deed that everything will have to be redefined. Everything. And so the atheist, if you'll pardon the crassness of it, my professor, Dr. Geisler, in my graduate school days used to have a very dry wit, had a dry wit, and he would say things like this: the atheist is better at smelling rotten eggs than laying good ones. He's right. They're able to sort of take this blade and lacerate away. Read Sam Harris's book, The End of Faith. Read his other book, A Letter to a Christian Nation, where he's challenging America to shred this vestige of God talk and God ideas. I'm in the process of writing a response to him, which hopefully will be completed very soon, calling it A Letter to Sam Harris on behalf of a Christian nation. But they do it. They jab away, they stab away. There are 3 or 4 things, actually there are several things, and I don't have the time to go into all of them, but there are several entailments that they have struggles with. The first is this: they have an intense problem then with defining morality. How do you talk up and down? How do you arrive at a moral law? And their standard response is, look at all the evil that is around us. I remember years ago at the University of Nottingham, when I first began, a student stood up and said to me, there's no such being as God because of all the evil that is around in the world. I said, can we talk on that for a few moments? He said, yes. I said, remain standing. I'll talk to you. I said, when you say there's such a thing as evil, aren't you assuming there's such a thing as good? He said, yes. I said, when you say there's such a thing as good, aren't you assuming there's such a thing as a moral law on the basis of which to distinguish between good and evil? He struggled for a few moments with that, and I reminded him of the conversation between Frederick Copleston and Bertrand Russell. When Bertrand Russell was pushed to the wall by Copleston, Copleston said to him, Mr. Russell, how do you differentiate between good and bad? Bertrand Russell said, the same way I differentiate between blue and green. Copleston said, but wait a minute, you differentiate between blue and green by seeing, don't you? Yes. How do you differentiate between good and bad? Bertrand Russell said, on the basis of feeling. What else? Now wait a minute. Copleston was a kind man. He really should have turned to Lord Russell and said to him, Mr. Russell, in some cultures they love their neighbors, in other cultures they eat them, both on the basis of feeling. Do you have any personal preference? How can this brilliant mathematician philosopher make so basic an error? But he admitted it. In a letter to the Observer, he said, I do not know how to deal with this issue of morality. It haunts me. You see, the question of a moral law, it comes within us. So I said to him, when you say there's such a thing as evil, aren't you assuming there's such a thing as good? He said, yes. I said, when you say there's such a thing as good, you must assume a moral law. He said, all right, I'll grant you that. I said, but when you say there's such a thing as a moral law, you must posit a moral lawgiver. But that's whom you're trying to disprove and not prove. If there's no moral lawgiver, there's no moral law. If there's no moral law, there's no good. If there's no good, there's no evil. What is your question? He looked at me and I quote, he says, what then am I asking you? I said, I'm not going to help you. I'm not going to help you. Now granted, if you're a thinking person, you'll say, Ravi, how do you get from the moral law to the moral lawgiver? Is that not an extrapolational jump? And in the Q&A time, if that question comes, I'll be very happy to deal with it. Right now, my time is very tight. So I've got to go on. The problem of evil, when you raise it, you raise the question of the nature of good. And when you raise the question of the nature of good, you have to start wondering, how do you really arrive at the reality of good and evil when there is no God? Do you know what Richard Dawkins has now come up with? Dawkins has gone so far as to say we have to deny the reality of evil if our argument is going to stay.